Lord of the universe, compassionate to me, Muhammad the Prophet taught me the way to be honest and truthful throughout every day.
The Holy Quran to life is my guide. Its teachings I follow, by it I abide. Islam my religion preaches good deeds, mercy and kindness to the right path it leads.
I was totally deviant while going astray. No faith, no belief, lost all the way.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Urwah Omar Abdullah, and I'm Swedish. And what you see here in the background is the Egyptian countryside. And I'm a Muslim. I said the Shahada in Stockholm, in Sweden, and quite quick I moved to Misr, Egypt. And here I found the peace and the possibilities to perform my Islam in a good way. It's very good for a beginner to come here.
Urwah decided to meet the crew of Huda in the peaceful countryside of Egypt. This reflects his love for simplicity and getting back to nature.
We are now standing in Sanhur al-Medina fi Kafr Sheikh, the district of Kafr Sheikh. Sanhur al-Medina is a very beautiful city, and they have all what you can get if you have a good deen. They have good mosques, they have a beautiful nature showing the wonders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He made me understand nature. He made me understand the human being. And all of this I could read about in the Quran, the Holy Quran, which I borrowed from a library in 2003 in Stockholm in Sweden.
Away from the hustle and bustle of Stockholm, Urwah found the simple village people of Egypt adhering to their faith and giving him the stability he needed.
I borrowed the Quran and I started to read, and I found a book of peace, love and understanding in opposition to what I've been taught all my life from the Western media and from Western sources. So I find peace in Masr. I find peace in Egypt. I find the possibility to perform my religion in a good way. And especially when you come to a small, it's not very small, but a little bit not so big village, you find a very, very good deen here. A religion that is very firm, and people go to the mosque, people come here, and they don't forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they read also about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his teachings of Islam.
Urwah's curiosity about life and religion started when he was only 6 years old. Where is God? Can God walk on earth?
In school, when I was a little child, it was the first degrees in school. I was about 7 years old. 6, 7, you started school in Sweden. We had a teacher, and this teacher was very religious. She taught, of course, Christianity, and the Christianity was something that every school child in Sweden had to listen to in the school when they were small. We came to the classroom in the morning, and what happened? Our teacher sat down behind the organ, and we were singing psalms. This is a kind of Christian songs. All the children were standing up beside their benches in the classroom, and we were accompanying with our voices her playing at the organ. This was a very beautiful moment in my life, in fact. But on the other hand, when it came to the religion, we had this as a subject in school. We were taught only about the Christianity. There was first very high up in classes in school, you had any idea about other religions in the world. But we were taught about religion, and we were taught about Jesus Christ. For me, Jesus Christ, he was a man walking on this earth. But for Christianity, he was described as a God. And this made me a little bit confused, because I couldn't get this together. How could this man walking on earth at the same time be part of God or anything like that? This was confusing for me as a child. So Christianity in its form, in its shape, was more like a story to me. Of course, it also had some importance. Our teacher said to us that Allah, that was called God for us children, that Allah, he could see everything and he could be everywhere at the same time. Unless we knew about it, he was there. So this was something I was thinking about, that we had an invisible God that at the same time was able to watch us, to hear us, to be with us, and this sounded in somewhat consistent for me as a child. So this I remembered, and I kept it until I became old enough to understand that the only religion worth its name is Islam.
His childhood passed peacefully, but by his teenage years he became more and more aware of the current issues, and he formed a rock band to express their radical ideas and opinions. Trying to find the answers to complicated modern-day issues is no easy task, and he was left at a loss.
In Islam, you pray to one God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's no human being that is held up to the position of a God. This is very important because this is called shirk. This is a sin, the biggest sin in fact. So what I reached as a child was to understand a little bit of what we called Tawheed, the oneness of God. When I was 30 years old, this is about 23 years later, after this experience as a school child. This is 30 years old after this point. I was very unhappy in my life. At the time I was doing a lot of things, many good things and some not so good, of course. One good thing was to play music. This is something good in the West. I felt very happy with this, but although I was playing in a rock and roll band, we were touring in Denmark, Norway, Finland and Sweden, of course, and making records, there was something missing. Something in my life was missing, and I didn't know what this was. I was in fact so unhappy at this stage of life that I didn't know what to do. It was not like I wanted to commit any suicide or anything like that, no. But I felt that something missing. And of course I might have been frustrated by other things coming from outside, like alcohol or drugs that I tried for a few times only, like many rock and roll stars. But at this time I felt I was so unhappy I didn't know what to do. And I've heard from a distance, that you could pray to God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be helped from those terrible feelings you had inside yourself. So I've heard this, but this was very faint, because I was not a praying person. I was not a believer at this time. I was what you call a kuffar, somebody who was engaged in the society in Sweden, playing music, radical music with political lyrics, helping people maybe, but still I was not a praying man. I was not. So I suddenly remembered my teacher from the old school days, that she was telling about this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who could be anywhere, at any spot, at any time, and that he was watching us, listening to us, and so on. So this made some impact on me at this stage. So I said to myself, even though I'm not a believer, I must try this, because I was very, very, very unhappy in life. So one evening I was sitting in my bed and I said, I will do this once, only once, because what can I else do? And I prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I prayed only 3 words: help me, please help me, Allah.
Despite having the obvious worldly means of happiness, he felt dissatisfied. What was missing from his life? With nothing to lose, he prayed to the one God he had learned about in school so many years ago. He was desperately unhappy and lost, but Allah came to his rescue. He felt his mercy and his sadness disappeared.
And at this stage, I understood, by the action of 1 second, I got help. And this was, for me, a very, very big sign. I felt I got help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only by saying those 3 words, making a serious prayer. This made me understand I was a believer. And this is when I was 30 years old in life. I was a believer. I got help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The time following this occasion, when I was sitting alone in my bed praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was an improved time in my life. I met a girl that I was very in love with, and we had a good time together for 6 years. It was like married here in Egypt, but of course we were not married in Sweden. But it's the same. We were faithful, and we kept together, and nothing else could disturb this relation. I was happy with this and other things in life. And of course this was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who made this possible, because before I was very unhappy, after I was happy. Alhamdulillah. What happened later in my life is a long story, because at this time I was praying to Allah, the one and only Allah. That is, I performed Tawheed. I was not praying in a Christian way. I was not interested in the story about Jesus Christ, the Holy Ghost, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a Trinity. I became a believer just because of one prayer. This was a very, very great force that hit me at this time. I had to confess to myself that I was a believer, from a non-believer to one believer in 1 second. It's not like easy for someone with other traditions to understand this. And it was not easy for me either to tell all my friends about this, because most of us were unbelievers. Maybe we had some belief in some faint God or anything like that, but it was like something different for us, difficult to understand. And we always had a feeling of religion as something that hindered us, that kept us back from being critical against society. So I had to confess to my friends I was a believer. And I had to mention this every time. It was like God told me, you can't sit here and hear them speak bad words about Allah. You can't do it. You must tell them this is wrong. Or at least you must tell them, please don't do it in my appearance because I am religious. I am a believer. So many of my friends was a little bit suspicious in the beginning. But on the other hand, they were understanding people, so they understood what I said when I said, don't disturb my belief. You can do whatever you want with your belief, but don't disturb my belief. So after this, some years went by, and I was working at the theater in Gothenburg, the town theater, and we were at the guest play in Jordan, in Amman. We were playing a play. We were invited by some governmental or theater groups to perform a play at the festival, theater festival in Amman. And we came with the play Romeo and Juliet in Sarajevo. It's a rewrite about the classical Shakespeare play. And this rewrite was about a Muslim girl and a Bosnian boy, a Serbian boy who wanted to be together, to marry and so on. The old theme about Romeo and Juliet. And they tried to flee from the war, and what happens? They got shot on the border in the no one's land. They got shot and they couldn't continue, of course. So we went to Amman to perform this play. And at one night I was sleeping at a hotel room. It was early in the morning, but I didn't know anything about the time or anything like that. But through the window I heard something very, very beautiful. It was so beautiful that I couldn't resist it. It was the Adhan. And I was very, very tired. I was sleeping. I was laying in my bed. I was waked up by this and I felt very, very heavy. I wanted to lay down in the bed and stay in my bed. But what happened? It was some kind of force that brought me up to the window, although I was very tired. And I felt a very, very hot, warm feeling listening to the Adhan. I opened the window a little bit more and I looked out over Amman. I looked out over Amman and heard the Fajr prayer. And it was so beautiful. And it was something that I had from my small years, when I was a little boy. It was like something coming from the past. It was my birth, maybe, I was listening to. It was something very, very beautiful. The Adhan made big impression on me at that time. It was not only the sound, it was like a call for me to wake up, to stop sleeping, to be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I kept this to Sweden when I came back, and people told me, what has happened? I said to my girlfriend, she was asking this to me, there's something happening with you since you came back from this traveling. What has happened? I said, I don't know. Something happened, but in the mirror view, since I became a Muslim 12 years after this occasion, I can see what happened was I was listening to the Adhan. And this Adhan made me on the steps to Islam much further.
As his thinking began to change, his lifestyle and work also changed. As part of his work as a lighting expert, he travelled to the Middle East. His friends recognized a subtle change in him since he had been in Amman. Finally, he told his friends and loved ones about the effect of the adhan on him. Their belief in freedom made them respect his new values, and they didn't turn their backs on him.
In the world at this time there was a big thing happening. What was it? It was 9/11. 9/11, when the two airplanes went into the World Trade Center in New York. At this time, I was living in Stockholm, Sweden. I was sitting in the room where I was educating those youth in music. And together we were listening to the radio, and suddenly there was this scream in the radio. Something very, very terrible had happened in America, in New York. Two planes had rushed into the towers, and we were shocked, all of us, about this news. This news was, of course, terrible. It's not very, very good when these things happen. It's very, very, very bad. But at the same time, I got suspicious. What happened? Suddenly, you had the Muslims charged for this. And I was very suspicious about this. Could it really be that everybody in 1 second after what happened knew who was performed this awful deed? This made me suspicious. I also read the newspapers at the time. And what did I find? I found a lot of quotations from the Holy Quran. I was looking at those quotations, and it kept me interested, because many of the mass media force was pointed towards this direction, to the Muslim case, to the Quran. And because I was interested in examining, and I was suspicious about if this was right or wrong, I borrowed the Quran in a library in Stockholm. Only to borrow this book was a trouble for me, because it was like a forbidden book. I came to the librarian and asked for the Quran very, very quietly. And she said, "Yes, we have it here. It's down in the shelf here. Please come and I was walking with her to this place, and I got it in my hand, and it was big and it was green, and it was very heavy, and I felt this is an important book. At the same time, I felt some kind of shame holding this book, so I wanted to hide it. I didn't want to show this to other people in my nearby. It was like inborn freight for this book. But I wanted to read it, so I carried it home, and I opened the book in secret in my home, and I started to read. And I started to look for those quotations I found in the newspapers and the media. And of course I found them, but they were like drawn from the contents of its written words in the Holy Quran. So I could find the aggression described in the media, the Western media. But this was not presented in the right way, because in the Quran it said that you should never ever attack someone, but you should of course defend yourself. And those defense ayahs was from the West turned to something aggressive. So they had been reading the Quran wrongly, and I got very angry about this, and also the suspicious mind from me about what's happening in the world with the two towers who were kind of charged for this. This was not the right. So I got very, very angry. At the same time, I was reading something very, very beautiful. So to me, reading the Quran at this part of my life had a very, very great impact on me. On one hand, I had the most awful feelings about what I've been taught all the years up till this date. On the other hand, I had the beauty of the Quran, the Holy Quran, that teached peace, beauty, and understanding and love.
الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم
لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم. So, it was a very, very big contrast I was meeting. This contrast made me more and more happy about my choice, because I was at this stage looking forward to Islam. It was not like I was reading this and it was like a direct connection to Islam, but I understood that my suspicious mind about people in the West black painting this religion had wrong, and that behind this was something very, very beautiful. And one of the proofs for this was what I was reading in the Holy Quran. I was reading about creation, what we can see here in Sanhur al-Medina. We can see the trees, we can see the haql, the fields, that is. And all this made impact when reading the Quran. This is one thing I was reading in the Quran that made me very, very happy. It's not like reading the Bible or anything like that. This is something else. Many Western people think that the Quran is kind of a copy of the Bible, but it's not. So I was reading, I was happy, and I was more and more convinced about I was on the right path.
Urwah could not accept that Muslims worldwide were guilty for one isolated incident. Guilt by association was wrong. Facts surrounding 9/11 were cloudy and led to doubt and a strong desire to know the truth. Filled with confusion and not yet a Muslim, he started to find out what the Quran is really all about. He had been misinformed about Islam and Muslims. Emerging from contrasting feelings of doubt, he now approached the Quran with gratitude, wondering why it had been slandered and why he did not know about it before. Finally, the gaps of knowledge that had plagued him throughout his life were filled, and with this came a dawning of contentment and happiness, something he had not felt before.
What happened after this? Yes, 2003, United States wants to invade Iraq. The week before this date, I said to myself, this is not right. In 1 week, we know that America will invade Iraq. This is something I will not stand behind. So I said to myself, I will choose the other side. Although I didn't know very much about this side, but it felt more comfortable to choose the Muslim side, because at least there was not those lies presented to me like I've been presented about the Quran and what was written in it. So I choose. I remember this occasion very well. I went to the jewelry and I found a small Islamic symbol. It's in fact the sword of Ali, the double sword. I bought it, and this was the symbol for me leaving my sympathies to Islam and leaving the West for their purpose or what they are wanting in life, with life. I was happy doing this. So when America invaded Iraq, I was on the right side. I was not supporting this war at all, not even from my origin. I was on the other side. I was among the Muslims, although I was not a Muslim yet. I had not yet said the Shahada. The Shahada comes 6 years after this point. No, it's not 6 years, it's maybe 4 or 5 years. Because I said Shahada 2007, the 12th January. That is what happened.
وعروة بعد أن أسلم له بعض من المميزات الذي أشهد بها حيث أن أحتك به منذ أكثر من 2 سنين. ومن هذه المميزات أننا عندما نسافر على سبيل المثال سنسافر الآن إلى السويد، سنصل إلى الشقة قبل الفجر بساعة. متعبين، قد ينام الإنسان ولا يستطيع أن يصلي الفجر. في ميعاد الفجر بالضبط أجد عروة يطرق الباب علي ويقول قم نصلي الفجر. فهذه من المميزات التي يتميز بها في مصر أو خارج مصر. عندما أقمت معه فترة من الزمن في مصر كان قبل الفجر بدقائق يرن علي قم نصلي الفجر. فهذه من المميزات التي أشهد له بها.
While worldwide controversy surrounded the issue of the invasion of Iraq, Urwah's good nature prevented him from supporting this gross misuse of power.
علاقتي بعروة بدأت من السويد، حيث أنني أقيم بعض الوقت في السويد. فذات يوم من الأيام التقيت به في المسجد وهو يصلي عندما بدأ إسلامه في الأسبوع الأول. فعندما قابلته في هذا الوقت عرضت عليه أن يأتي إلى شقتي نشرب شويا شاي أو نجلس نحكي سوا عن الإسلام. فقبل. فعندما جلست معه سألته هل هو يحفظ الفاتحة. هو في بداية إسلامه لا يعرف قواعد الإسلام الصحيحة. فجلست معه بجانب الكمبيوتر وبدأت أفتح له بعض المواقع الإسلامية مثل إسلام ويب، إسلام وي، وأقرأ له الفاتحة أو يحضر بعض المشايخ يكرر هذه معه الفاتحة عدة مرات. واقترحت عليه أن يحاول أن يتعلم اللغة العربية، فاللغة العربية مفتاح لفهم الدين.
After accepting Islam, Allah sent His help in the form of a good friend for Urwah, who helped him come to Egypt, learn Arabic, and find his way.
Actually, I met Urwah a few years back, and I would like to mention something. The first thing that made me, or attracted me when I saw him, is how he is having the dignity of following the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You would see that clearly in him, and this is something that is very clear in many of the new converts. They convert to the religion of Islam, or they revert back to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, submitting themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by following the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. That we as Muslims should learn from this, that this is the form of unity. Someone coming from a different background to many of the Muslims, where Muslims are not too many in numbers, and where he's coming from, and you would see him immediately having the beard, and even the qamis, that he has the honor always wearing it, which is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. He used to love the most the qamis, even though there is no such a thing as an Islamic code of or Islamic dress for men. But he, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect him, he had this zeal that he wants to follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is something that definitely is a good thing, and mashallah, he would try his best to seek guidance for his family. And I had met with some of his family, and he asked me to explain to them about matters of the religion. So it's something definitely that should bring benefits to, I benefited myself, in which that we should hold fast more to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that it has so much beauty in it when a person is holding fast to it. And that's how the religion of Islam and the beauty of it, in which people coming from all corners of the world following the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and you won't find that in any way of life. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us as Muslims all over the world to hold fast to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, not to be deviated by whatever deviation there is, following the Sunnah, the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Living close to nature and mixing with Muslims who care about practicing their religion softened his heart. Urwah embraced Islam with love and spread this compassion to all around him. From confused child to radical rock and roll musician to Islam, It has been a long, eventful and fruitful journey. Starting in Sweden, then to the Middle East, Urwah grows with the compassion of Allah, the acceptance of those around him, the nurturing of the natural environment in which he finds peace, and his ardent desire to reunite his loved ones and share the peace and joy he has found.
I was totally deviant while going astray. No faith, no belief, lost all the way. Now I'm a Muslim and God I pray. For all his blessings, my voice I raise.
In my God I